Today we're taking a look at another round of fun and easy tricks for skateboarders who already have somewhat of an intermediate foundation. So up first we have the Ollie to Nollie shove it. Now I don't know if there's an actual trick name for this, but it's exactly what it sounds like, which is just an Ollie where you land only on your front wheels and then quickly do a Nollie shove it. It's kind of like just doing a really fast Ollie to nose manual to shove it, except you're doing it really quick and all in one fluid motion. Obviously before doing this trick, you should probably know how to Ollie. And for the foot positioning of this one, you pretty much just do it exactly like an Ollie, except you may want to move your front foot up more towards the nose to make it easier to land on your front wheels. You may want to practice just a little bit of nose manual balance, even though you're not really going to have to hold it. You still want to be comfortable Ollieing and landing on those front wheels, so you can try it while just standing still at first. And then finally, you also want to be well versed in doing Nollie shove-its. This is one of the first easy tricks I ever covered, so you may want to go back and watch that if you don't have these down. But basically, you can start off by rolling and getting into a little nose manual and then immediately trying to shove it out. And really this trick is just the combination of the Ollie, the landing in the nose manual, and the shove it. And if you can put that all together, then you got it. So yeah, there really aren't too many individual practice steps for this one. It's really just a matter of having each one down really well, and then just having the coordination and the timing to pull it off. Coming up, we have power Ollies. Now, I personally don't really like this name for the trick, but it's kind of become pretty prevalent. I used to call these tail drops. But what you're doing for this one is setting your board up so your tail is on the edge of an obstacle, whether it's something low like a curb or high like a bench. And then you're just doing an Ollie off the object from that tail drop position. This is probably another one where it might be a little deceiving on how tricky it might be if you've never done it before. There are a couple things that you really just want to watch out for when you're trying this one. The main ones being that when you're in the position, you don't want to dip your nose too far down before Ollieing, or the board might just slide off the edge. And conversely, you do want to make sure that you get at least a little bit of a dip down in your nose. Otherwise, you're basically just trying to do an Ollie with no leverage at all, and this will also just cause you to jump off and do nothing. So the actual motion itself, though, is pretty similar to an Ollie, except you sort of have to do that little dip first. But some good ways to start off practicing are just putting your board on a curb in that same tail drop position. And you don't really even need to do the Ollie at first. If you're doing it on something this low, you can sort of just scoot off the edge and see what it feels like. And then after doing that a few times, you can work up to actually doing little Ollies off the curb. And if you do eventually want to take this off of something bigger, I would suggest first trying to do this in an area where you can land either into grass or just on softer ground. And then once you sort of have the feeling for it down and you can land on your board with both feet, that's when I'd say you can start to bring it to the concrete and try rolling away. So yeah, this one's pretty easy. Just be careful of your timing and you should be able to get it down. Up next we have the Fakie pivot to shove it. Yet another trick where I don't know if there's a real name for it, but essentially you're just doing a weird delayed Fakie Bigspin, but you'll be sort of overemphasizing the Fakie backside 180 pivot. And then once that 180 is pretty much complete, you're going to use that last bit of momentum to shove the board around in a separate motion. So yeah, like I said, really just a glorified Fakie Bigspin, but it feels really cool to pull off. For this one, it'll be much easier for you if you understand how to do Fakie backside pivots, Fakie shove-its, and it'll probably really help if you know how to do straight up Fakie Bigspins. So the steps to learn this one are probably exactly what you think. You can probably start off while standing still and just doing a pivot and then giving the board a little shove near the end of the rotation. But with the way that momentum works when you're riding Fakie and turning, I honestly think it's probably easier to do this one while rolling. So yeah, just get really comfortable with your Fakie backside pivots again and your shove-its, and then just slowly work your way up. You can do just a 90 pivot with a little bit of a shove-it, or you can do the full pivot with just a tiny shove-it and landing with one foot. Either way though, it's just a gradual process of sort of building up to the full rotation and having the full power of the scoop. One tricky thing can be your weight sort of getting thrown off balance after doing the pivot. So you just really want to make sure that after you've done that and you're focusing on your back foot now for the shove-it, that you also pay some attention to where your body is, because you want to jump towards the board so you can land on it. This one's probably a little stupid, but I kind of like the way it feels because it's like an awkward big spin. And it's probably an easy way to get a letter in a game of skate, even though you'll probably make the person hate you. But yeah, I definitely recommend this one. It's a lot of fun to do. For our next trick, we have switch and Fakie manuals. So this one's kind of a cop-out by just naming a trick and switching the stance. but at least for me specifically, doing a switch manual and a fakie manual versus a regular and nose manual is like having never really stood on a skateboard before. My switch balance is absolutely horrible and my fakie balance is even worse. So these were two things I decided to specifically start working on in the last few months, and I have gotten a little bit better at them, which proves to me that they are possible. But they were such a challenge that I definitely think it's a good trick that if you haven't really tried them, then you should kind of look into. Of course, just like regular and nose manuals, some people will just get them super easily and have good balance, whereas others will have to work at finding that sweet spot a lot more. But either way, I think it's sort of the same as learning the regular manuals, where you can practice by starting off holding onto something. And of course, this doesn't really help you get balance because you're just holding on, but it does help you kind of figure out where you should be putting your feet and your body weight. Once you get into the manual, you can lift your hands off and try to balance as much as you can. But honestly, for practice steps, this one is really just kind of brute force where you have to do it over and over again until eventually you can sort of feel out the sweet spot and you can hold them longer and longer. So yeah, definitely try these out if you haven't before because they can be deceptively hard. Next up, we have a slightly easier one with the Flatground Footplant. Again, I don't know if this is the real name, but it's pretty much exactly what you're doing. You're rolling, and then you ollie and pop the board up, put one foot on the ground, and you catch the board with your front hand, and then jump back on. This is a pretty basic and straightforward trick, but it's pretty fun to do, and you can do it up and over objects as well. Really, you only need a basic understanding of how an ollie works, because this trick isn't really even an ollie, but you just need to know how to slam the tail down to get the nose up in the air. And your first practice step is just going to be standing still and popping the board up and trying to catch it with your front hand. Just try to keep the board close to you, don't kick it out too far, and it should be easy to kind of grab on the edge of the nose. The other half of the practice step would just be standing still while you're holding the board, and then jumping onto it. Once you're comfortable with both of these steps, you can start rolling and popping the board up and trying to catch it. And then finally you can try and put it all together, and you don't have to do it really quick at first. You can roll, pop the board up, and then jump back onto it. And then from here, it's just a matter of putting these steps together in one faster motion, and then you should be able to do this fairly easy Flatground Footplant. Up next, we have the No Comply Fakie Frontside Bigspin. Now this one probably sounds a little bit more complicated than it actually is, but essentially you're rolling fakie, you step off like you're going to do a no comply, and then your body turns 180 and the board does a 360 and you land. This one's pretty fun to do, and it really only has a few practice steps. It really helps if you're comfortable doing fakie frontside pivots, as well as fakie frontside 180s, and fakie frontside shove-its. And also, it should go without saying that you should at least have some experience with no complies, as that's the main foundation of this trick. The only thing to really watch out for with foot positioning is making sure that you understand the concept of a frontside scoop, kind of like you would for a frontside shove-it. Because to start off, you're just going to be rolling fakie, and you're going to pretend like you're going to do a fakie frontside 180, except right when it's time to do the 180, you're going to put your foot down on the ground, and then simultaneously, you're going to give the board a shove with your foot in the pocket, as well as start turning your body frontside. It's okay to practice at first by stepping off and just kind of kicking the board out and seeing what happens. And once you've done this a few times, it's good to start putting at least one foot on the board, and this will kind of help you get an understanding of how to control the board and keep it more underneath you. If you find that the board isn't spinning enough, then you may want to focus on your foot that's in the pocket so you can give it more of a kick forward with the scoop. And really besides that, it's just a matter of focusing and making sure that your body weight is over your board and not leaning off to one side or the other, because this will cause the board to kind of just shoot out. And then finally, once you've kind of gotten comfortable with all of this, you can actually try putting it together and landing with both feet. The nice thing about no comply tricks is you can start off kind of slow since one of your feet goes on the ground, and just kind of get a feel for it, and then eventually speed it up and put it together. And finally, for our last trick, we have the switch shove-it. Now this one may sound pretty basic to you, but if you're someone who hasn't really gotten into skating switch, then this can actually be a little trickier than you may think. While you're just copying what you do when you do a regular shove-it, but you're mirroring your stance, having to switch which foot does what and where your body is moving to is kind of awkward. Before learning this one, I would recommend having a really good grasp on how to do regular shove-its. Just understanding how to use your back foot to scoop the board around and then kind of control it with your front foot is a really good foundation, and just something good to have in your head when you're trying to learn the switch shove-it. So to start off, I'd recommend just standing still on your board with your feet in the same position that you would use for a shove-it, And really just sort of take note of where your back foot is in the pocket and how far up the board your front foot is. And now you're going to want to switch stances to the opposite way, where now your front foot will be in that back pocket and your back foot will be further up the nose. And then from here, it's really just a matter of doing what you did when you were first learning a regular shove it, which is to practice while standing still, slowly start to feel out how to shove the board and scoop it around. And once you've started to feel that out, you can start landing with just one foot, which should then lead to you trying to land with both feet. And then once you can do it while standing still, it's time to start trying while rolling. I've always talked about how shove-its can kind of feel way different when you're rolling because the momentum is either going with you or against you. So for these, it may take a few tries once you've started rolling to sort of get the feel back of how to get the shove-it around. But after that, it's just a matter of time before you get it all the way around and you land a switch shove-it. So this is just another set of tricks that I think are pretty fun and not too hard. I definitely think that they'd be a bit too hard for a beginner skater. But if you're someone who has a lot of the basics down and a good foundation and understanding of how to shift your weight and kick the board around, then these should be a fun set of things to learn, maybe in an afternoon or two. But they should certainly give you a challenge. Just remember that at the end of the day, skateboarding is all about having fun. And a big part of that, at least for me, is just sort of experimenting with new tricks that you hadn't really thought of before. And maybe you'll get some down, or maybe it'll open up an idea for another trick. So yeah, I hope you have a good time learning these. Go out, be safe, and have fun. As always, I'd like to thank my beautiful Patreon pledgers. And I'd like to thank you for watching, and you can like and subscribe if you want.